I'm gonna be honest with you, I broke the cardinal rule of any reviewer. I went ahead and watched IGN's review of this game, and quite frankly, I'm appalled. They gave it 5.8 out of 10. They didn't mention many of the mechanics of the game, and it just leaves me scratching my head. So, is this game worth you checking out? Well, let's find out the SwitchUp way.
This is seriously messed up! It's straight up bongles is what it is.
When Finn and Jake wake up one morning, they discover that the whole world's been flooded. Now, obviously, this means an adventure. So they set off to the Ice Kingdom to try and uncover exactly what's going down. After discovering a very conveniently placed ship, they set off on the high seas.
Sure, I like where this is headed.
Come on, Jake, raise your voice. Let's sing. Me and Jake are off to see the Ice King.
Now, while I enjoyed the 10-hour or so story, it can feel a little bit contrived. For example, you'll arrive on an island, complete a pretty mundane task, only to be told, right, we need to head all the way back, and trust me, sailing your ship can take you quite a while. Overall though, not being familiar with any of these characters myself, I found them very enjoyable and they made me laugh several times. The dialogue is excellent for the most part, with some of the funniest and most engaging pieces coming when you're sailing your ship. What the story did do really well was having an interesting way of continuing it. So they have interrogation rooms where Finn and Jake have to extract the information by choosing the correct options, and it was a funny parody of the game LA Noire.
We're almost there, man. Keep going. Spill your guts, Ice King! Tuh! I will break you!
While overall this is quite a simplistic system, I just enjoyed it a lot and it wasn't expected at all. Overall the story just felt fun. I enjoyed the introduction, I felt like I knew the characters straight away, and as we set sail on the boat I couldn't help but feel the Zelda Wind Waker vibes. The story for me scores 14 out of 20. Gameplay starts out upon the good ship Jeff. You can accelerate with the right trigger and slow down or reverse with the left trigger. You'll find loot on the water that you can collect by holding the B button. Pressing the minus button brings up the world map, which makes it easier to navigate. But overall the world isn't overly huge, it gives an impression of being very vast indeed, but actually it's not that big at all. At the top of the screen you have a handy compass with a gold star pointing to your next main quest or a blue star pointing to the next sub-quest. You can shoot the cannon on your boat by pressing the X button. Now it does take a long time to traverse the map on the boat, and actually this can get a little bit tedious, but I really enjoyed it, especially early on in the game. However, later when you've done the trip a few times you will find it becoming a little bit long in the tooth. Of course, with a title like this you can expect a few pirate encounters. These range from battling other ships to fighting giant pink sea monsters, and even the spot of the occasional pillaging. I really enjoyed my time on the high seas, but also 50% of the game is spent on land, so let's take a look at that. While the islands are all different and quite unique to look at, it becomes very apparent quite quickly that there isn't a great deal to do when on land. You can hit using your sword, which will break items and gather you some money. Enemies can be avoided, but if you do come into contact with them, you'll enter a turn-based battle system. The battle system was quite simple, but I did enjoy the rotational selection wheel that allows you to quickly select abilities and use them. You can select healing items as well as buffs from your satchel. After beating an enemy, you're given some XP, which will level up your character. You're also given some cash. This cash can then be used straight away in the menu to level up your character. You can increase their attack, strength or their defense, or just spend it on increasing their special attack. Now the game doesn't do a good job of telling you this, and actually you will need to use this system very often to increase your strength, especially when you're fighting those tougher enemies. It does work really well, and I like the fact that you can increase your character's levels quite consistently, and it just seems like you're constantly adding to your character and improving their stats. These are capped at each level, so when you do level up you feel like once again that progression can continue. You're almost given too much money in this game. As it is the currency for upgrading your character, literally every item you hit is going to give you 10 gold. And after a while you'll find you've got reams and reams of gold, just literally money bags hanging off of you. And you can upgrade your stats to the max for each level quite easily. The other part of the gameplay is the interrogation system. Some characters will require you to interrogate them. I really enjoyed these are so funny. But you have a little team talk at the start of these interrogation sessions to decide what the character's like and whether you should go in good cop or bad cop. And you then have a spinning wheel and have to stop that at the right section.
This is getting real old real fast! You better spill the beans soon, man!
If you choose wisely, then the character dishes out some information that's useful to your story. If you choose incorrectly, then they get quite angry. It's very much like the game LA Noire, but in a kind of tongue-in-cheek way, and I enjoyed it immensely. What could frustrate some players though is that it seems almost impossible to lose here. If you do make a mistake, then they kind of talk to each other and give you the most obvious clue ever as to what to do next. And even if you don't choose the right option a couple of times, you eventually just are left with the right option, so I'm not sure what you actually have to do to fail these. There are a number of boss fights in the game, and despite a few issues that I'll go into later on, these are pretty generic and quite fun, and the characters are quite interesting. But overall there's nothing overly challenging, and you won't find yourself struggling to beat a boss in this game, especially if you use the aforementioned levelling up system wisely. Now, despite all of these great things about the game, unfortunately it has some serious performance issues. I've had 4 crashes that have meant that I've had to restart the game completely, and it has some of the longest load times I've ever seen. Now, what I must say is that there is a day 1 patch on the way, but the release notes don't cover quite a few of the bugs that I've actually seen in the game. Now, I'm sure they'll patch this up, but it does feel to me a little bit rushed. This was a disappointment to me because it tarnishes an otherwise fun experience. When they're fixed, you could add a couple of points onto gameplay, but for me, overall at the moment, I'm going to give gameplay 14 out of 20.
Long time no see. Fern! Oh man, first the flood, now you? The case that he has melted. Come on, Jake, let's go and do our hero thing. Set course and let's sail.
As you can hear, music and sound is excellent in this game, with lovely voice acting from all of the cast of the hit animation. By far my favourite elements so far have been the lovely sea shanties that take place at various times on your journey. These are totally ridiculous, but they just make you smile as you sail across the high seas.
We're heading for the evil forest. Are we dumb or are we brave? We're off on an adventure. We're off the world to save. We're off the evil forest. Are we dumb or are we brave?
Each kingdom has its own music, which is suitably fitting, but once again the dreaded bugs were striking. When you're having conversation in the general game, the volume was incredibly low. Now, I've spoken to the publishers about this and it is something that's being looked at, but I have to dock points. Overall, I give sound and music 15 out of 20. Visually, the game more than does justice to the subject material. The world is vibrant and beautiful, and despite having quite low-res textures, I really think the whole thing looks wonderful, much in the same way as Breath of the Wild managed to do with its graphics. Characters have that lovely cartoon look, but also look really crisp. Animations for the most part are good, although there are a few janky moments. But as you can see, it just looks charming overall. The weakest area of the graphics, I would say, are the attacks you do when in free roam mode. These just look quite clunky and there's generally just one animation for them. Overall though, I really like the graphics in this game, and I would give them 17 out of 20. Yep, 17 out of 20, that's what I'd give them. if the performance wasn't shocking at times. Now I'm talking seriously shocking. Have a look at this. I will call Exhibit A the huge random graphical glitch flash. Next, take a look at the smoothness as the boat moves in. Poor optimization often gives you these jitters, kind of stops and starts, and it just feels like they've not polished the game before they've released it. So for me, overall, I'm giving graphics 14 out of 20. When these issues are patched, feel free to add a couple of points. Good old Brit tax, £34.99 in the UK or $39.99 in the US. Adventure Time is definitely a premiumly priced game, but are you getting a premium package? Well, the answer is yes and no. Yes, as I've mentioned, the game has lots going for it. There's a lovely story, the side quests are fun enough, and there's plenty to do, as well as leveling up your character and exploring the world. No, because the game is incredibly buggy at the moment. Now, fair play to the developers, they've been incredibly honest, but also have shown a huge number of improvements that are coming in a day one patch, so many of the things I've discussed will be fixed by the time you ever play this game. I didn't notice anything on the patch notes about improving the loading times though, and for me that was one of my biggest issues. But me personally, I've really enjoyed the game. However, these things would definitely make me think twice about purchasing the game until they were resolved. Irrespective of the day one patch though, I still feel price is maybe $10 too high, and I would give value currently 12 out of 20. So there you have it. Adventure Time has some really charming aspects to it. I enjoyed the combat system. It was very retro, old school turn-based, but I liked the leveling up and the progression was solid. Moving about on the ocean can get a little bit tedious when you have to repeat trips, but again, with the sea shanties, the whole experience was lovely. The side quests are a little tedious and the main story isn't overly long or incredibly interesting, but for people who are new to Adventure Time, it will introduce them to the characters in a good way. The huge letdown came in terms of polish and performance, and we've seen it so many times before where game developers rush these games out of the door, especially it seems sometimes on the Nintendo Switch, and we end up with a port that's worse than the other versions. As it stands right now, it's still a good game and it is still fun to play. If you're a fan of the series, maybe consider picking it up. It scores a final SwitchUp score of 69%. Remember guys, we're giving away a free copy of Punch Club on the Nintendo Switch this month for all those subscribers who are actively engaged in the comments. Don't always have to say good things. If you hate a game, tell me about it. But as always from Glenn and I, for all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. See ya!